Imagine standing at an altar in a wedding dress you didn't choose, about to marry a man you've never loved. You're Elena Morgan, 19 years old, and your father signed a contract selling you into marriage to pay his business debts. The groom is Lord Marcus Blackwell, 43 years old, cruel, with 2 previous wives who both died under mysterious circumstances. You've begged your father not to do this, but he said the contract is binding and your refusal would bring shame and financial ruin to the family. So here you stand in a church filled with witnesses, the priest asking if you take this man. Your mouth opens to say the words you don't mean, the words that will trap you forever. You start, your voice breaking. Then the church doors slam open with such force they crack against the walls. Everyone turns. A man stands silhouetted in the doorway, impossibly tall with long, flowing black hair and eyes that glow red even from this distance. Stop this ceremony. His voice carries absolute authority that makes the priest stumble backward. This marriage will not proceed. He walks down the aisle and you realize he's not just a man. He's vampire. Lord Damien Shadowmere, the alpha vampire who rules these territories. He stops at the altar and looks directly at you. Did you consent to this marriage? No, you whisper, tears streaming. Then it's invalid, he states, turning to Marcus. And you, marrying an unwilling girl to satisfy a debt contract. That violates vampire law. This ceremony is over. He's about to interrupt a forced marriage and save you from a monster. Elena Morgan had known about the forced marriage for exactly 2 weeks. 2 weeks to panic, to beg, to try desperately to find a way out. Her father, Thomas Morgan, had made catastrophically bad business investments. He owed massive debts to dangerous people who wouldn't wait for payment. Lord Marcus Blackwell had offered a solution. He'd pay Thomas's debts in full in exchange for Elena's hand in marriage, a business transaction disguised as matrimony. Father, please, Elena had begged when he first told her. Don't do this. Marcus is cruel. His 2 previous wives both died suspiciously. Those were accidents, Thomas had interrupted. And we don't have a choice, Elena. If I don't pay these debts, we'll lose everything. The family will be ruined. You'll be destitute on the streets. So you're selling me instead? Elena had demanded through tears. I'm ensuring the family's survival, Thomas had replied coldly. The contract is signed. You'll marry Marcus in 2 weeks. That's final. Elena had tried everything. She'd begged her father to reconsider. She'd contacted distant relatives hoping someone would help. She'd even considered running away, though she had no money and nowhere to go. Marcus himself was a nightmare. During their brief chaperoned meetings before the wedding, he'd made his expectations clear. You'll be an obedient wife, Marcus had stated flatly. You'll manage my household, produce heirs, and cause no trouble. Your father's debts are considerable. You should be grateful I'm willing to take you despite your family's disgrace. I don't want to marry you, Elena had said quietly. What you want is irrelevant, Marcus had replied. The contract is binding. You'll fulfill your obligations. Elena had researched Marcus's previous wives. Both had been young, 18 and 20 when they married him. Both had died within 3 years. The first had fallen from a balcony. The second had taken ill suddenly and died despite doctors' efforts. Elena was terrified she'd be the 3rd dead wife, but the contract was legal. Her father had signed it. The church had approved the marriage. There was no way out. Now Elena stood at the altar in a wedding dress her father had chosen, looking at Marcus, who smiled with cold satisfaction. The church was filled with witnesses, people who'd watch her trap herself in a marriage she didn't want. The priest began the ceremony. Elena felt numb, detached, as if this were happening to someone else. Do you, Elena Morgan, take Marcus Blackwell to be your lawfully wedded husband? Elena's mouth opened. She was supposed to say, I do. Those two words would seal her fate forever. She started, her voice breaking with suppressed tears. Then the church doors slammed open with explosive force, the sound echoing through the stone building like thunder. Everyone turned in shock. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway, impossibly tall with long flowing black hair and a commanding presence that filled the entire space. His eyes glowed red, clearly visible even from the back of the church. Stop this ceremony. His voice carried absolute authority that made the priest actually stumble backward. This marriage will not proceed. Elena's heart stopped. She recognized him from descriptions she'd heard. Lord Damien Shadowmere, the alpha vampire who ruled these territories, and he was walking directly toward her altar. Damien walked down the aisle with predatory grace, his glowing red eyes fixed on Elena and Marcus at the altar. The wedding guests pressed back against their pews, creating space for him. He reached the altar, and the priest actually backed away, recognizing vampire authority. Lord Shadowmere, Marcus said, with forced politeness. This is a private ceremony. A forced marriage ceremony, Damien interrupted coldly, his eyes still on Elena. Miss Morgan, did you consent to this marriage? Elena's breath caught. No one had asked her that question directly. Everyone had assumed her consent because the contract existed. No, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. I don't want to marry him. My father forced me. I never consented. Then this marriage is invalid, Damien stated, turning his glowing red eyes on Marcus. You're attempting to marry an unwilling participant. That violates both human marriage law and vampire territorial law. This ceremony is over. The contract is legal, Thomas protested, standing from his pew. I signed it. Elena is my daughter. I have the right. You have no right to force your adult daughter into marriage, Damien interrupted, his voice carrying 3,000 years of lethal authority. Mr. Morgan, selling your daughter to pay debts is unconscionable. The contract might be legal, but the marriage requires her consent, which she doesn't give. Elena, tell him you consent, Thomas demanded desperately. Think of the family. I don't consent, Elena said louder, finding courage in Damien's presence. Father, you're trying to force me to marry a man whose previous 2 wives both died suspiciously. I'm terrified he'll kill me too. I will not consent to this marriage. Marcus's expression turned ugly. Lord Shadowmere, this is none of your concern. The girl's father signed a binding contract. The girl has a name, Damien interrupted, his eyes flashing brighter red. Elena Morgan. And Elena has the right to refuse marriage regardless of contracts her father signed. Mr. Blackwell, I'm aware of your history. 2 previous wives, both dead within 3 years of marrying you. Both deaths ruled accidental but highly suspicious. You were planning to make Elena the 3rd victim, weren't you? That's slander, Marcus sputtered. It's fact, Damien corrected coldly. I've lived 3,000 years. I recognize predators when I see them. Marcus, you sought out a young woman whose family was desperate, knowing she'd be trapped and vulnerable. You've done this twice before. It won't happen again. He turned to Elena and his expression softened slightly. Miss Morgan, you're under my protection now. No one will force you to marry against your will. Do you understand? Yes, Elena whispered. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Damien replied. We still need to address the debt contract. He looked at Thomas. Mr. Morgan, you owe money to certain people. That debt still exists even if the marriage doesn't proceed. I can't pay it, Thomas protested desperately. That's why I arranged the marriage. You arranged to sell your daughter, Damien corrected. There's a difference. I'll pay your debts. In exchange, Elena comes with me to Shadowmere Manor, where she'll be safe from further exploitation. Elena stared at him in shock. You'd pay my father's debts? Why? Because no one deserves to be forced into marriage to save someone else's financial mistakes, Damien stated. Elena, you have a choice. Come with me, or stay and deal with your father's continued attempts to use you as currency. What do you choose? I choose you, Elena said without hesitation. I choose freedom. Damien extended his hand to Elena. Then come with me. Now. Elena took his hand and stepped down from the altar, still wearing her wedding dress. It felt surreal. Moments ago she'd been trapped, about to be forced into marriage. Now she was walking away with a vampire who'd just paid a fortune for her freedom. You can't do this, Marcus shouted. The contract is void, Damien interrupted without looking back. Elena, keep walking. Don't stop. They walked down the aisle together, every wedding guest staring in shock. Elena's father called after her, but she didn't turn. She'd spent 19 years being controlled by him. That ended now. Outside the church, an elegant carriage waited. Damien helped Elena inside, then joined her. Shadowmere Manor, he instructed the driver. As the carriage pulled away, Elena finally allowed herself to break down. She sobbed, from relief, from fear, from overwhelming emotion. You're safe now, Damien said quietly, not touching her, but offering his presence as comfort. No one will force you into anything again. Why did you help me? Elena asked through tears. You don't know me. You paid my father's debts, a fortune, for a stranger. I heard about the forced marriage, Damien explained. A young woman being sold to pay debts, married to a man with a suspicious history. That violates everything I believe about consent and autonomy. I couldn't let it happen. You saved my life, Elena whispered. Marcus's other wives both died. I would have been next. I know, Damien confirmed. Marcus is a predator. He targets vulnerable young women, marries them, isolates them, and eventually kills them, usually within 3 years. You would have been his third victim. Elena shuddered. My father knew that. He knew, and he still tried to force me to marry him. Your father chose financial security over your safety, Damien stated gently. That's unforgivable. Elena, you don't owe him anything. Not loyalty, not obedience, not sacrifice. You're an adult who deserves autonomy over your own life. They arrived at Shadowmere Manor, a magnificent estate. Damien led Elena inside where a kind woman named Mrs. Hartley greeted them. Mrs. Hartley, this is Elena Morgan. She's had a traumatic day and needs care. Can you help her? Of course, my lord, Mrs. Hartley said warmly. Come with me, dear. Let's get you out of that dress and into something comfortable. Hours later, Elena sat in a comfortable room wearing simple clothes. Her elaborate wedding hairstyle taken down, feeling human again. Damien knocked gently before entering. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed, Elena admitted honestly. This morning I thought my life was over. Now I'm free because a vampire lord interrupted my wedding and paid a fortune to save me. I don't understand why you do that." "Because forced marriage is wrong," Damien replied simply. "Because consent matters. Because young women shouldn't be sold to pay their father's debts. Because I've lived 3,000 years, and I've learned that power should be used to protect people, not exploit them. Elena, you deserved to be saved. It's that simple." "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now you decide what you want your life to look like," Damien stated. "You're free, genuinely free. Your father can't control you. Marcus can't marry you. You get to choose your own path. What do you want, Elena?" "I want to never be controlled again," Elena whispered. "I want autonomy. I want to matter." "Then you'll have all of that," Damien promised. Starting now, over the following weeks, Elena discovered what freedom actually meant. She'd spent 19 years being controlled, first by social expectations, then increasingly by her father's demands, finally culminating in the forced marriage attempt. She'd never made real choices about her own life. Now, at Shadowmere Manor, she was given unprecedented autonomy. "What would you like to do today?" Mrs. Hartley asked each morning. The question alone was revolutionary. No one had ever asked Elena what she wanted. "I don't know," Elena admitted. "I've never been allowed to just choose." "Then start small," Mrs. Hartley suggested gently. "Choose what you'd like for breakfast. Choose which dress to wear. Choose how to spend your afternoon. Practice making decisions." It was harder than it sounded. Elena had been trained to defer, to obey, to prioritize others' preferences over her own. Making even small choices felt wrong somehow. Damien noticed her struggling. "You keep asking permission for things you don't need permission for." "I know," Elena said. "It's just, I've been trained my whole life to ask permission, to defer to others, to not take up space or make demands. Suddenly being told I can just decide things for myself, it feels wrong." "That's learned helplessness," Damien explained gently. "Your father systematically trained you to believe you don't deserve autonomy. Unlearning that takes time. But Elena, you do deserve to make your own choices. You always did." Damien spent time with Elena, helping her discover interests she'd never been allowed to explore. She loved reading, but had only been permitted to read books her father approved. Damien's library had thousands of books on every subject. "Read whatever interests you," Damien encouraged. "You don't need anyone's approval." Elena discovered she loved philosophy, history, science, subjects her father had deemed inappropriate for women. She spent hours reading, learning, expanding her understanding of the world. "You're very intelligent," Damien observed one evening, discussing a philosophy text with her. "My father said education wasn't important for women," Elena replied. "He said my only value was in being marriageable." "Your father was catastrophically wrong," Damien stated firmly. "Elena, your intelligence is remarkable. Your insights are valuable. You have worth far beyond your marriage ability, which itself should never have been treated as your primary value." As months passed, Elena became more confident. She made decisions without asking permission. She expressed opinions without apologizing. She took up space without feeling guilty. "You're transforming," Damien told her one afternoon. "The frightened girl at the altar is becoming a confident woman." "Because you gave me freedom," Elena replied. "And safety. and time to discover who I actually am when I'm not being controlled. Elena had also been falling in love with Damien. How could she not? He'd saved her, protected her, given her autonomy, treated her with respect and genuine interest. "I think I'm in love with you," Elena admitted one evening, then immediately panicked. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. You saved me out of principle, not because you wanted anything from me. I don't want you to think I'm trying to obligate you." "Elena," Damien interrupted gently, "stop apologizing for having feelings. I'm in love with you too." Elena stared at him in shock. "You are?" "I've been in love with you for months," Damien confirmed. "But I didn't say anything because you needed time to heal and discover yourself without pressure. Elena, I don't want you to love me out of gratitude or obligation. I want you to love me because you choose to." "I do choose to," Elena stated firmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm making a real choice about love. And I choose you." 6 months after the interrupted wedding, Elena's father came to Shadowmere Manor. Thomas Morgan looked terrible, haggard, desperate. His debts were paid, but he'd lost his social standing and business connections after the scandal of the interrupted wedding. Damien received him with Elena present, at her request. "Elena," Thomas started, "you need to come home. People are talking. The scandal is your problem, not mine," Elena interrupted. "Father, you tried to force me into marriage with a man who would have killed me. Why would I ever come home?" "I was trying to save the family," Thomas protested. "You were trying to save yourself," Elena corrected, "by selling me. Father, Marcus's previous 2 wives both died suspiciously. You knew that. You knew, and you still tried to force me to marry him. You were willing to sacrifice my life for your financial security." I thought the previous deaths were accidents," Thomas tried weakly. "You didn't care whether they were accidents," Elena interrupted. "You needed money, and Marcus offered it. My safety, my consent, my life. None of that mattered to you." Thomas looked at Damien. "Lord Shadowmere, surely you understand family obligation." "I understand that children aren't currency," Damien interrupted coldly. "Mr. Morgan, you failed as a father the moment you signed that contract. Elena owed you nothing once you chose money over her well-being." "I'm your father," Thomas said desperately to Elena. "You owe me respect, obedience. I owe you nothing," Elena stated firmly, and saying it felt liberating. "Father, you lost any right to my respect when you tried to force me into a marriage that would have killed me. I'm not coming home. I'm not reconciling with you. I'm not pretending any of this was acceptable." "What am I supposed to do?" Thomas demanded. "My reputation is destroyed. My business connections are gone. People say I tried to sell my daughter." "Because you did try to sell me," Elena replied. "And now you're facing social consequences for that choice. Those consequences are not my responsibility. You created this situation. You deal with it." "Elena, please," Thomas begged. "No," Elena said firmly. "Father, for 19 years you controlled every aspect of my life. You decided what I wore, what I read, where I went, who I spoke to. You trained me to believe I had no value beyond being marriageable. Then you tried to force me into a marriage that would have killed me, all to pay your debts. That's unforgivable. I'm not going to pretend otherwise to make you feel better." Thomas looked genuinely devastated. "I never meant to hurt you, but you did hurt me," Elena interrupted. "Severely. And Father, your intentions don't erase the harm. You tried to force me into marriage with a predator. I would have been his third dead wife. The fact that you meant well or were trying to save the family doesn't change that." "I'm sorry," Thomas whispered. "I know you are," Elena replied. "But sorry doesn't undo what you did. It doesn't make me trust you again. It doesn't make me forget that you valued money over my life. Father, I forgive you for my own peace of mind, but I don't want a relationship with you. Please leave." After Thomas left, Elena felt lighter somehow. She'd confronted the man who'd controlled her entire life and stood her ground. "You were magnificent," Damien told her. "I was terrified," Elena admitted. "But I meant every word. He doesn't get to control me anymore. No one does. I control my own life now." "Exactly," Damien confirmed. "Elena, you've become someone extraordinary. Someone who knows her worth and won't accept less than she deserves." 1 year after Damien interrupted the forced marriage ceremony, he asked Elena a question that changed everything. They were in the gardens of Shadowmere Manor at sunset. When Damien took her hands, "Elena Morgan, I love you. I've loved you since I first saw you at that altar, terrified but trying to be brave. This year watching you discover yourself has been extraordinary. You've become someone confident, intelligent, strong. You know your worth now. You won't accept less than you deserve. And I hope you'll believe me when I say that you deserve everything. Will you marry me?" Elena's heart stopped. "You want to marry me?" "Very much," Damien confirmed. "But Elena, I need you to understand something crucial. I'm asking you to marry me because I love you and want to spend my life with you. Not because of any obligation, not because I saved you, not because you feel grateful. If you say yes, it has to be because you genuinely want this, because you choose me freely. Do you understand?" "I understand," Elena replied, tears forming. "And Damien, I'm saying yes. Not because you saved me, though I'm grateful. Not because I feel obligated, which I don't. But because I love you. Because you gave me freedom to discover who I am. Because you've treated me with respect and dignity. Because being with you makes me happy. I'm choosing this freely. I'm choosing you." "Then we have another choice to discuss," Damien said gently. "I'm vampire. I'm immortal. You're human. Eventually you'll age while I remain unchanged, unless you choose transformation. I can make you vampire. We could have eternity together. But it's permanent. You'd give up mortality, sunlight, aging. Elena, this has to be your choice. Completely yours. No pressure, no obligation. What do you want?" Elena thought carefully. A year ago, she'd been making decisions based on what others wanted. Now she knew how to choose for herself. "I want forever with you," Elena stated. "I want centuries to continue growing, learning, being myself. I want immortality to explore the world and help others. Transform me, Damien. But can we wait until after the wedding? I want to marry you as a human first. Make that choice as myself before transformation." "We can wait as long as you want," Damien assured her. "Elena, this is your decision. Always your decision. That's what matters." They married 2 months later in the same church where Damien had interrupted the forced ceremony. But this time, everything was different. Elena wore a dress she'd chosen. She walked down the aisle smiling, not terrified. She said her vows freely, without coercion. "I, Elena Morgan, soon to be Elena Shadowmere, promise to spend forever with you. 1 year ago, you interrupted a forced marriage and gave me freedom. You taught me I deserved autonomy, respect, and love. You showed me that consent matters more than contracts. You helped me discover who I am when I'm not being controlled. I choose you freely, Damien. I choose this marriage willingly. I choose love on my own terms, for eternity. I, Damien Shadowmere, Damien replied, promise to always respect your autonomy, to never force or coerce you, to remember that love requires consent, freely given. You're the woman I interrupted a ceremony to save, and you've become someone extraordinary. I love you. I'll spend eternity proving that your freedom matters more than any contract or obligation, for always. 3 months after the wedding, Elena chose transformation. She became vampire, not because Damien wanted it, but because she did. When she woke as an immortal, Elena felt powerful. She'd made every choice leading to this moment freely. That made all the difference. 20 years after the interrupted wedding, Elena had built an extraordinary life. She'd become an advocate for people trapped in forced marriages. She wrote books about consent and autonomy. She created safe houses for people escaping abusive situations. She helped change laws around marriage contracts. You've saved hundreds of people, Damien told her one evening, as they reviewed letters from individuals Elena had helped. Because you saved me first, Elena replied. Damien, I was standing at that altar, about to be forced into marriage with a man who would have killed me. You interrupted and gave me freedom. Now I'm doing the same for others. Elena had become particularly involved in reforming marriage contract laws. The system that had allowed her father to nearly force her into marriage still existed, trapping other young people. These contracts treat people as property, Elena argued during a meeting with legislators. My father signed a contract selling me into marriage to pay his debts. That shouldn't be legal. Consent should be required regardless of any contract. Her advocacy work led to significant legal reforms. Marriage contracts that didn't include explicit written consent from both parties were declared void. Forced marriage became explicitly illegal with real criminal penalties. You've changed the system that nearly destroyed you, Damien observed. I'm making sure what happened to me can't happen to others, Elena corrected. That's all. But it feels meaningful. I survived forced marriage attempt. Now I'm helping others survive too. One young woman, a 19-year-old named Sarah who reminded Elena painfully of herself, came to Shadowmere Manor seeking help. My father signed a contract, Sarah explained desperately. I'm supposed to marry a man I've never met next month. I don't want to, but the contract is legal and I don't know how to escape. The contract is only legal if you consent, Elena interrupted gently. Sarah, did you sign anything? No, Sarah admitted. Just my father. Then the marriage can't proceed without your explicit written consent, Elena stated firmly. That's the law now. Sarah, you can refuse. You have that right. But my father says, Sarah started. Your father is wrong, Elena interrupted. Sarah, I was exactly where you are 20 years ago. My father tried to force me into marriage to pay his debts. A vampire lord interrupted my wedding ceremony and saved me. Now I'm paying that forward by saving you. You don't have to marry anyone you don't want to marry. Do you understand? Over the following weeks, Elena helped Sarah navigate the legal system, assert her rights, and escape the forced marriage. Watching Sarah transform from terrified to confident reminded Elena of her own journey. You saved her, Damien observed. I gave her what you gave me, Elena corrected. The understanding that consent matters, that she deserves autonomy, that forced marriage is never acceptable. Elena's advocacy work expanded internationally. She spoke at conferences about consent and autonomy. She consulted with governments on marriage law reforms. She trained lawyers and advocates. "You've become someone extraordinary," Damien told her one evening. "I became someone who understands that freedom matters because I almost lost mine," Elena replied. "Damien, you interrupted my forced marriage 20 years ago. That one act of intervention changed everything. Now I'm intervening for others. That's my purpose. That's my mission. Helping people escape what I almost couldn't." "Then we make a good team," Damien smiled. "You save people from forced marriages. I support your work. Together we change systems. Together we prove that consent matters more than contracts," Elena agreed. Always. 50 years after Damien interrupted Elena's forced wedding ceremony, they returned to that same church. It had been converted into a community center, providing resources for people escaping forced marriages, funded by Elena's advocacy organization. "Do you remember standing at that altar?" Elena asked, looking at the space where she'd almost been trapped forever. "Every detail," Damien confirmed. "I remember walking in and seeing you frozen in terror, about to say words you didn't mean. I remember asking if you consented, and watching relief flood your face when I said the marriage was invalid. I remember offering you freedom, and watching you choose to take it." "I was so scared," Elena admitted. "I thought my life was over. I thought I'd be forced to marry Marcus and become his third dead wife within 3 years. Then you interrupted everything. You asked if I consented. No one had asked me that. Everyone had just assumed." "Consent should never be assumed," Damien stated. "Especially not in marriage." Elena looked around the community center, filled with resources helping others escape situations like hers. "This is your legacy, too. You interrupted one forced marriage 50 years ago. Now thousands of people have been helped because you showed that intervention matters." Over 50 years, Elena had helped change cultural attitudes about forced marriage. What had once been accepted as family obligation or honoring contracts was now recognized as abuse. "You've transformed how society views consent," Damien observed. "That's extraordinary." "It started with you interrupting a ceremony," Elena replied. "One act of intervention. One vampire lord walking into a church and declaring that consent matters more than contracts. That changed everything." A young woman approached them. Emma, one of the advocates Elena had trained. "We just helped another woman escape forced marriage. She's safe now. I wanted to thank you again for creating this organization." "Keep helping people," Elena encouraged. "Every person we save from forced marriage is someone who gets to choose their own future. That matters." After Emma left, Elena and Damien sat quietly in the converted church. "Do you ever regret that day?" Elena asked. "You paid a fortune for my father's debts. You took on responsibility for a traumatized 19-year-old. You could have just walked away." "Never," Damien stated firmly. "Elena, interrupting your wedding was the best decision I made in 3,000 years. Not just because I love you, though I do, but because it was right. You deserved to be saved. Everyone in forced marriage situations deserves intervention." "You taught me that consent matters," Elena said. "That autonomy matters. That freedom matters. That I deserved all of those things even when I'd been trained to believe I didn't." "Damien, you didn't just interrupt a ceremony. You interrupted a pattern of control that had defined my entire life. You gave me freedom to discover who I actually was. And you became someone extraordinary, Damien replied. Someone who uses her trauma to prevent others' trauma. Someone who fights for consent and autonomy. Someone who saved thousands of people from what you nearly experienced. Elena looked at the altar, where she'd almost been trapped. They were forcing me into marriage. You interrupted the ceremony. That one act of intervention changed my entire life. Now I spend eternity interrupting forced marriages for others. That's the legacy, Damien agreed. One interrupted ceremony that taught the world that consent matters more than contracts. 50 years later, they were still proving it. Together. Forever. And every person they saved proved that sometimes interrupting a ceremony is exactly the right thing to do.